Whereas 67, joint resolution to provide for related procedures concerning the articles of impeachment against Alejandro Nicolas Mayorkas, Secretary of Homeland Security. SJ-Res 68, joint resolution providing for the issuance of a summons, providing for the appointment of a committee to receive and to report evidence, and establishing related procedures concerning the articles of impeachment against Alejandro Nicolas Mayorkas. SJ-Res 69, joint resolution to provide for related procedures concerning the articles of impeachment against Alejandro Nicolas Mayorkas, Secretary of Homeland Security.
Madam President, in order to place the joint resolutions on the calendar under the provisions of Rule 14, I would object to further proceeding en bloc.
Objection having been heard,
Joint resolutions will be placed on the calendar.
the joint resolution will be placed on the calendar.
Now, Madam President, as the Senate gavels back into session today to pick up right where we left off in March, confirming more of President Biden's outstanding nominees and advancing legislation that protects and serves the American people. There is much the Senate has to accomplish in the coming weeks, and getting anything done, anything, will require bipartisan cooperation. It's not easy, but nevertheless essential. Today, the Senate will commence by voting to invoke cloture on the nomination of Susan Bezos to be U.S. District Court Judge for the District of Nebraska. I've also filed cloture on the nominations of Robert White to be a District Judge for the Eastern District of Maryland and the nomination of Anne Marie McIff Allen to be a District Judge for the District of Utah. On the legislative front, Congress has until April 19th to pass an extension of FISA's national security authorities. That is the next major deadline we face on the calendar. Preventing FISA from lapsing will take bipartisan cooperation and swift action. The House is currently working on the best path forward on FISA, and the Senate stands ready to jump into action to prevent this important national security authority from lapsing. We must get FISA done this work period. As the Congress gavels back into session, I also urge Speaker Johnson and House Republicans to snap out of their paralysis and pass the Senate's National Security Supplemental. The situation in Ukraine is desperate. Speaker Johnson has now sat on his hands for 55 days as the National Security Supplemental has collected dust in the House. That's 55 days of America standing on the sidelines while our friends in Ukraine fight and die on the battlefield with no support. 55 days of our European allies wondering when the U.S. will step up. And with each passing day, Ukraine continues to run out of more ammo, continues to run out of soldiers, and continues to run out of hope that can successfully expel the Russians from their borders. And let's be blunt, the biggest reason Ukraine is losing the war is because the hard right in the Congress has paralyzed the United States from acting. That's it. That's the reason. Speaker Johnson has to decide for himself whether or not he will do the right thing for Ukraine, for America, and for democracy, or if he'll allow MAGA Republicans to hand Vladimir Putin a large victory. I'm confident that if the Speaker puts the Senate's National Security Supplemental on the floor, it will pass. It remains the best, quickest, and most realistic way to get Ukraine the help it needs. So again, there is a lot that the Senate must do in the coming weeks and months, and to get anything done will require bipartisan cooperation. I thank my colleagues for their good work so far in 2024 and look forward to working with all of them to keep delivering for the American people. Now on Capital One and Discover. 2 months ago, nearly 2 months ago, Capital One and Discover quietly announced plans for an unprecedented multi-billion-dollar merger that in the long run could risk higher costs for consumers and small businesses alike. Capital One and Discover are two of the largest credit card issuing institutions in America. If they merge, the new company would likely become the largest credit card issuer in the United States with over 400 million customers. That could risk higher interest rates, bigger fees, diminished competition. But even so, most Americans today have no idea that this merger is coming. So yesterday, I sent a letter to both Capital One and Discover asking them to share with my office more information regarding antitrust and consumer protections. I want to know more about market shares in this industry. We've already had plenty of consolidation throughout the economy. I want to know about a potential increase in fees. I want to know if workers will be laid off. and I'd like to hear how consumers are being made aware of this deal. One thing is certain about credit card companies. Much of their bread and butter is a myriad of fees and sometimes eye-popping interest rates. That's why the proposed merger of Capital One and Discover is such a concern. History is very clear that when big financial institutions get even bigger, the American consumer usually gets the short end of the stick. So before a credit card merger takes a potential swipe at consumers, every question should be answered. Now on student loan debt. Since the day the President took office, I've urged him to use every tool available to cancel as much student debt as possible. Yesterday, the American people received some exciting news. President Biden, to his credit, announced a new executive action to provide student debt relief to nearly 30 million more Americans. Specifically, the President's plan will automatically forgive interest accrued on existing student loans for 25 million borrowers. The President's plan will also automatically cancel the full amount of debt for over 4.5 million Americans who have already qualified for forgiveness through a decade in a repayment program. And it will provide more than 10 million borrowers with at least $5,000 in debt relief. This announcement is a clear sign that the President is listening. He's listening to Congress's call to take action, which I've done for years. And he's listening to the pleas of millions of borrowers who want to get their lives back on track. So today's announcement is good news. It's good news for everyone, particularly for young people and people of color. And Democrats will continue exploring every option under the sun to lower costs and make college more affordable. Already the President's plan has removed the total debt burden for over 4 million Americans. This plan goes much further. But on the other hand, unfortunately, our Republican colleagues continue to oppose student debt relief and have wrapped their arms firmly around the MAGA Supreme Court's cruel decision to block student debt cancellation for millions of Americans. And Democrats are going to make sure the American people won't forget it. Now on the Ryan Corbett resolution. Madam President, it has sadly been over 600 days since Ryan Corbett, a New York native, has been unjustly detained by the Taliban. Ryan traveled there to renew his visa and pay the local staff of his nonprofit when he was taken without cause, without explanation, without any semblance of process. Later this afternoon, I'll meet with the Corbett family to talk about our efforts to bring Ryan home. His wife, Anna, and their 3 children have been so brave. I've met them already a few times. But they've been brave through this tragic situation, and I'm in constant awe of their strength and resolve. Today, I'm introducing a resolution alongside Leader McConnell, calling for Ryan's immediate and unconditional release. I urge the Senate to pass this resolution before Ryan's birthday, which is April the 13th. Throughout this process, I've worked closely with the Corbett family, the White House, the State Department, and other high-ranking officials to make sure that Ryan's safe return remains a top priority. We have made progress. Last September, when Ryan was designated as wrongfully detained by the State Department, giving his case a higher diplomatic priority. But we're still working. Anna has spoken with Ryan a few times, and he's been reportedly being held in terrible conditions, which has caused his health to deteriorate rapidly. So time is of the essence to get him back. As long as Ryan is held by the Taliban, I will never stop fighting to bring him back home and reunite him with Anna, his children, his family, as quickly as possible. I want to thank Leader McConnell for joining me in this resolution and everyone on both sides who have supported this resolution. Now on forum shopping. Madam President, last month I wrote a letter to the Chief Judge of the Northern District of Texas, urging the district to apply new reforms adopted by the Judicial Conference to limit the practice of judge shopping. I was disappointed to learn that the Chief Judge and his court have decided to ignore the Judicial Conference reforms and allow judge shopping to continue to run rampant in his district. The bottom line is this, it's very simple. Judge shopping jaundices the fairness of our entire legal system. No one, regardless of ideology, should tolerate when interest groups cherry-pick judges of their choice to get a favorable outcome. If courts like the Northern District of Texas refuse to adopt common-sense reforms to limit judge shopping, Congress should consider legislation to end this dangerous practice and restore trust in our federal judiciary. And on chips, well, this morning, another good announcement from President Biden. He and Commerce Secretary Raimondo announced a preliminary agreement with TSMC Arizona to provide billions in chips and science incentives to support more than $65 billion in investments for 3 leading-edge fabs in Phoenix, Arizona. Just like the announcement of Global Foundries, Intel, and others, today's announcement proves Democrats are delivering in a big way on our promise to bring manufacturing back to the United States, to strengthen our national security, and get ahead of rising costs from supply chain shortages. Today's announcement is precisely the kind of economic good news we've worked for years in the Senate. 5 years ago, I approached my friend Senator Young and told him we should work together on bipartisan legislation to boost U.S. investment in innovation and advanced manufacturing. I knew that if America wanted to remain #1 of scientific might and industry, we had to get serious about getting the federal government to invest. Thanks to the efforts of people like Senators Kelly and Brown and Cantwell and Wyden and Warner and many more, we passed Chips and Science into law. And we're now delivering these historic investments to power a new generation of American manufacturing. And there is yet more to come, with further investments in projects like Micron's proposed $100 billion project in upstate New York. So I'm thrilled to see that Chips and Science is delivering as intended, and congratulate President Biden and Secretary Raimondo on this tremendous effort. And finally, Madam President, I have these glasses today, which were given to me by the president of Fordham University, special Fordham Eclipse glasses. So now, I'm going outside to my balcony to take a look at the eclipse, which is reaching its peak at about 87% right now. I yield the floor.
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. Morning business is closed. Under the previous order, the Senate will proceed to executive session to consider the following nomination, which the clerk will